For 8 months, she warned them. Wrote reports. Ran simulations. Proved their tactics were killing thousands. They called it stupid. A chalk trick. Unrealistic. Then her brother drowned. 5 days later, she destroyed an admiral's convoy in 47 minutes. 3 months later, enemy submarines were being massacred. Nobody believed the girl with chalk. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. At 9:14 a.m. on March 3, 1943, Admiral Max Horton walked into a basement in Liverpool and said 5 words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. This chalk trick is stupid. 47 minutes later, a 19-year-old girl had sunk his entire convoy using nothing but that stupid chalk trick. And Admiral Horton couldn't do anything to stop her. 3 months after that, German U-boats were being destroyed at 3 times the rate they had been sinking before. 41 U-boats obliterated in just 31 days. The German submarine fleet was being massacred so badly that Grand Admiral Dönitz called it Black May and pulled his entire Wolfpack force out of the Atlantic. The girl's name was Janet Patricia Oakley. Her weapon was a piece of chalk and a basement floor. And what happened in those 47 minutes would save 48,000 Allied sailors from drowning in the North Atlantic. But before any admiral would listen to her, her own brother would die. And she would use his death to prove that the stupid chalk trick was the only thing that could win the war. This is that story. February 1943. The Royal Navy was dying. Not slowly. Not gradually. Dying fast. German U-boats were slaughtering British convoys at a rate that made mathematicians physically sick when they calculated the numbers. 63 ships sunk in February alone. 342,000 tons of supplies sent to the ocean floor. 2,300 sailors drowned in freezing water. But here is what terrified British command. The death rate was accelerating. In 1942, U-boats were sinking an average of 96 ships per month. By early 1943, that number had jumped to 108 ships per month. The rate was increasing by 12.5% every quarter. At that acceleration rate, Britain would run out of fuel by July. Food by September. Medicine by November. The country would have to surrender not because Germany invaded, but because Germany had starved them into submission. And British tactics were making it worse. Much worse. Every single time a U-boat attacked a convoy, British escort ships did the exact same thing. They chased it. Hunted it down. Dropped depth charges. Tried to kill it. This was doctrine. This was what 200 years of Royal Navy tradition demanded. Hunt the enemy. Attack aggressively. Never let them escape. There was just one problem. This tactic was increasing the death rate instead of decreasing it. Between January 1941 and February 1943, British escorts using aggressive pursuit tactics had sunk an average of 5.2 U-boats per month. During that same period, U-boats had sunk an average of 96 Allied ships per month. The math was brutal. For every 1 U-boat the Royal Navy destroyed, Germany sank 18 Allied ships. The British were losing. Badly. And nobody knew how to stop it. Janet Patricia Oakley was 18 years old when she walked into the Western Approaches Tactical Unit in July 1942. She was a mathematics student. Top marks. Teachers said she could see patterns in numbers that other students missed. Her mathematics professor at university had written a note in her file that would later seem prophetic. Miss Oakley possesses an unusual ability to visualize three-dimensional movement patterns. She can predict trajectory intersections with remarkable accuracy. Recommend for strategic planning roles. That note had caught the attention of naval recruiters desperate for analytical minds. Britain was losing the war at sea. They needed people who could think differently. People who hadn't been taught the old ways. People who could see what experienced admirals were missing. When Janet received her orders to report to Derby House, she had no idea what she was walking into. Her mother cried. Her father was proud. Her brother Thomas, already serving on HMS Hesperus, wrote her a letter. "Do whatever they ask, Janet. We need all the help we can get out here. The U-boats are killing us." The unit was hidden in a basement in Derby House, Liverpool. Top secret. Didn't officially exist. The basement was freezing. Concrete walls dripped with condensation. The floor was painted to look like 900 miles of ocean with chalk grids for navigation. There were wooden models to represent ships. Black pieces for German U-boats. White pieces for British escorts. Red pieces for torpedoed merchant ships that sank. By July 1942, there were a lot of red pieces. Captain Gilbert Roberts ran the unit. He explained the mission on Janet's first day. They were going to play war games. Full-scale simulations. Young women from the Wrens would play German U-boat commanders. Real Royal Navy officers would command British convoys. The goal was simple. Find tactics that actually worked. Teach those tactics to every escort commander. Save the convoys. Win the war. Roberts told Janet something important. The Wrens were chosen specifically because they had no naval experience. No training. No doctrine. No preconceived ideas about how naval warfare was supposed to work. He said officers with decades of experience kept making the same mistakes because their experience had taught them the wrong lessons. "Miss Oakley," Roberts said on that first day, "the Royal Navy has been following the same tactical doctrine for 2 centuries. It has served us well against surface fleets. But U-boats are different. They hide. They disappear. And our officers keep treating them like surface ships. We need people who can think differently. People who see patterns instead of tradition." Janet was assigned to study captured German tactical manuals. Documents taken from sunken U-boats. Commander diaries. Attack plans. Wolfpack coordination procedures. She spent her first week reading nothing but German tactics. How U-boats shadowed convoys. How they communicated. How they coordinated attacks. How they exploited British responses. One document stood out. A U-boat commander's diary from April 1942. He had written, "The British escorts are incredibly predictable. When we expose one submarine, they always chase. Always. We use this. One submarine draws them away. The others attack through the gaps. It works every single time. The British never learn." Janet read that passage 3 times. Then she went to Captain Roberts. "Sir, the Germans know exactly what we're going to do before we do it. They're not just attacking convoys. They're manipulating our responses. Using our own doctrine against us." Roberts nodded. "That's what we need to prove. And that's why you're here." Janet's job was to be a German U-boat commander. Study captured German tactics. Attack simulated convoys. Sink them. Her first simulation was July 15, 1942. Commander Harrison commanded the British escorts. 50 years old. 32 years in the Royal Navy. Veteran of World War I. Decorated officer. He was about to be destroyed by a teenage girl with chalk. The simulation started at 2 p.m. 40 merchant ships. 6 escort destroyers. Standard defensive formation. Janet commanded 4 U-boats. She had spent 3 days studying German Wolfpack tactics. Roberts gave the signal. The game began. Harrison positioned his escorts in a wide circle around the convoy. Standard doctrine. The escorts would patrol in overlapping patterns. If a U-boat appeared, they would hunt it immediately. Janet watched for 30 minutes. Just studying. Looking for gaps. Calculating timing. Then she moved one U-boat into visual range. Let Harrison's escorts see it. On purpose. Harrison responded exactly as doctrine required. Two escorts immediately broke formation and chased Janet's U-boat at full speed. While those two escorts were gone, Janet's other three U-boats slipped through the gaps and got inside the convoy. They started attacking. 43 minutes later, 12 merchant ships were destroyed. 4 escorts damaged. 0 U-boats sunk. Complete massacre. Harrison was furious. He looked at the chalk marks on the floor showing his destroyed convoy. Then he looked at Janet. Then he said it. This is stupid. This floor trick proves nothing. Real U-boats can't do this. Captain Roberts walked to a filing cabinet. Pulled out casualty reports from June 1942. Convoy on 113. 16 ships sunk. The U-boats had used the exact tactics Janet just demonstrated. Harrison went silent. Roberts ran the simulation again. Same scenario. Different tactics. This time, Harrison's escort stayed tight around the convoy. No chasing. No gaps. Janet tried everything. Her U-boats couldn't penetrate. They circled for 90 minutes, then withdrew. 0 merchant ships sunk. Complete defensive victory. Harrison stared at the floor. His hands were shaking slightly. He had been commanding escorts in the Atlantic for 18 months. Had lost 3 convoys. Watched good men drown. And this teenager had just shown him that every single death had been preventable. How many convoys could we have saved, he asked quietly. Roberts looked at Janet. She did the calculation in her head. Based on our simulations, sir, if tight defensive screens had been implemented in January 1942, approximately 1,100 merchant ships and 13,000 sailors would still be alive today. The room went silent. 13,000 men. Dead because nobody had questioned doctrine. Harrison asked, "Why isn't the Admiralty listening to you?" Roberts said, "Because we're asking them to admit that 200 years of naval tradition is wrong. And that teenage girls with chalk figured it out before they did. The math was obvious. Tight escort screens worked. Aggressive pursuit didn't. But the Admiralty wouldn't listen. Between July 1942 and February 1943, WADA ran 473 simulations. The pattern was always the same. Officers who chased U-boats lost convoys. Officers who stayed tight won. Janet and the other Wrens wrote detailed reports. Mathematical calculations. Proof that aggressive pursuit created fatal gaps. They sent the reports to the Admiralty. The Admiralty sent them back with notes in red ink. Simulations are not combat. Floor games prove nothing. This chalk trick is unrealistic. Real naval warfare doesn't work like this. Officers with 30 years at sea know better than girls with chalk. One admiral wrote directly on a report, "These stupid floor games are a waste of time and resources." Meanwhile, the death rate kept climbing. July 1942, 96 ships sunk. August 1942, 108 ships sunk. September 1942, 98 ships sunk. October 1942, 94 ships sunk. November 1942, 119 ships sunk. Month after month, British sailors drowned because the Admiralty refused to believe that a stupid chalk trick could save lives. Janet ran simulation after simulation. Sank convoy after convoy. Showed officer after officer why their tactics were killing people. Some officers learned. Most didn't. And the ones who did learn weren't allowed to change doctrine anyway. The Admiralty wouldn't listen. They kept calling it stupid. February 27, 1943. 3:47 p.m. Janet was in the middle of a simulation when Captain Roberts pulled her aside. He had a telegram in his hand. His face was gray. HMS Hesperus. Lost with all hands. Convoy SC-121. U-boat attack. No survivors. Her brother Thomas was dead. Thomas was 23. Destroyer officer. Anti-submarine warfare specialist. He had written to Janet 3 weeks earlier. Said his ship was escorting a convoy. Said the tactics weren't working. Said they kept losing ships. The letter was still in Janet's locker. She had read it so many times she had memorized it. Janet, we chased 3 U-boats last week. Got none of them. Lost 2 merchant ships while we were gone. The convoy commander is following doctrine perfectly. And we're dying perfectly. I hope whatever you're doing in that basement is more useful than what we're doing out here. Stay safe. Thomas. He had been right. Convoy SC-121 departed Halifax on February 15, 59 merchant ships. 9 escorts. Standard formation. Everything by the book. Thomas's ship was positioned on the convoy's port flank. Exactly where doctrine said destroyers should be for aggressive pursuit capability. U-boats found them on February 24, attacked at night. The escorts responded according to doctrine. They chased the U-boats. Aggressive pursuit. Exactly what they had been trained to do. Thomas's captain later said in his report that they had spotted a U-boat on the surface at 11:43 p.m. They immediately broke formation and pursued at full speed. Fired star shells. The U-boat Dove. They dropped depth charges for 18 minutes. When they gave up and turned back toward the convoy, they saw the explosions on the horizon. 5 merchant ships had been torpedoed while they were gone. The gaps they had left were being exploited by other U-boats. At 2:14 a.m., HMS Hesperus detected another U-boat. They pursued again. This time the U-boat waited until the destroyer was isolated, then fired. 2 torpedoes. Both hit. The destroyer broke in half. Sank in 4 minutes. 117 sailors died. Thomas drowned because his ship chased a U-boat and left a gap in the convoy screen. Janet had run that exact scenario 8 times in 8 months. 8 simulations. 8 times the escorts chased and left gaps. 8 times the convoys got massacred. She had written reports. Sent warnings. Explained with mathematics why aggressive pursuit was fatal. The Admiralty had called it stupid. Thomas died following orders from admirals who thought chalk tricks were unrealistic. Roberts asked if she needed to leave. Take time to process. Janet said no. She needed to finish the simulation. She needed to make sure no more officers thought aggressive pursuit saved convoys. She went back to the plotting table. Finished sinking the convoy. Then she explained exactly why every escort that chased a U-boat had created a gap that killed merchant ships. That night, Janet made a decision. She was going to force Admiral Max Horton, the man who commanded the entire western approaches, to come to Derby House. She was going to make him command a convoy. And she was going to sink him using the exact tactics that killed Thomas. She was going to prove that the stupid chalk trick was the only thing that could save British sailors. Roberts was hesitant. Janet, Horton he's one of the most respected officers in the Royal Navy. He won't take kindly to being challenged by a Wren. Especially not now. Janet's voice was steady. Captain, my brother died following doctrine that I proved was fatal 8 months ago. How many more brothers have to die before someone listens? How many more families get telegrams because admirals are too proud to admit they're wrong? Roberts looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll send the invitation. The formal request went to Horton's office the next morning. It was carefully worded. Not a challenge. An invitation to observe innovative tactical developments that could change the Atlantic campaign. Horton's response came back within hours. He would attend. March 3, 0900 hours. Janet spent the next 3 days preparing. She reviewed every simulation. Every mistake. Every gap. Every death. She was going to show Horton exactly what killed Thomas. And exactly how many sailors could have been saved if someone had listened 8 months earlier. On the morning of March 2, the day before Horton's visit, Janet walked into the pit early. It was 5:30 a.m. The basement was empty. Cold. Silent. She stood at the plotting table where Thomas's convoy had been simulated 8 days before the real battle. The chalk marks were still faintly visible. She traced them with her finger. The convoy formation. The escort positions. The gaps. She whispered to the empty room. "I'm going to make them listen, Thomas. I promise." Admiral Max Horton arrived at Derby House at 8:47 a.m. He was 59 years old. Tall. Distinguished. Multiple medals. One of Britain's most decorated submarine hunters. Roberts briefed him. Explained the simulations. The tactical testing. Horton listened politely. Then he said it. "Captain Roberts, I've heard about your chalk floor operation. I'll be honest. It seems like a stupid way to test naval tactics. Floor games can't replicate real combat conditions. But I'm here. So let's see what these girls can do." Roberts stayed calm. He said, "Admiral, would you like to command the escorts personally?" Horton smiled. "Absolutely. Let's see if these teenage girls can actually sink me with their chalk trick." They set up the simulation. 50 merchant ships. 8 escorts. Janet commanded 3 U-boats. Jean Laidlaw commanded 3 more. Horton studied the board. Positioned his destroyers exactly as doctrine prescribed. Wide defensive perimeter. Aggressive coverage. Janet recognized the formation immediately. Standard pattern. Same pattern that had killed Thomas 5 days earlier. Roberts gave the signal. The game began. At 9:14 a.m., Janet moved her lead U-boat into visual range. Let Horton's escort spot it. Horton responded immediately. 2 escorts broke formation and chased her U-boat. Janet's submarine dove and disappeared. While Horton's escorts were chasing her, Jean's U-boats moved into the gaps. The convoy was exposed. Janet surfaced again. Different position. Drew another escort away. Horton was following doctrine perfectly. And doctrine said chase aggressively. Every time he chased, he created new gaps. Jean's U-boats penetrated the screen at 9:31 a.m. got inside the convoy. Started attacking. The simulation ended at 10:01 a.m. 47 minutes. 17 merchant ships destroyed. 0 U-boats sunk. The room was silent. Horton stared at the board. At the red chalk marks. At the 17 destroyed ships. Then he looked at Janet. She was holding her piece of chalk. 19 years old. 5 days after her brother's funeral. Horton's face changed. The dismissiveness was gone. He asked quietly, "How did you predict exactly where my escorts would go?" Janet said, "Mathematics, sir. When you chase a U-boat, you create a gap. The gap is predictable. The timing is calculable. U-boat commanders exploit it every time." Horton asked, "How many times have you run this simulation?" 63 times in 8 months, sir." "And how many times did the convoy survive when escorts chased U-boats?" 0 times, sir." Horton went very quiet. Then he asked, "Were any of those 63 simulations based on real convoy battles?" Janet said, "Yes, sir. Including convoy SC-121. I ran that scenario 8 days before the real convoy sailed. I predicted the escorts would chase U-boats. I predicted 13 ships would sink. And did they? 13 ships sank, sir. Exactly as calculated. Including HMS Hesperus. My brother's ship. The room was completely silent. Horton stared at her. Didn't speak for 30 seconds. Then he said 5 different words. 5 words that changed the entire Battle of the Atlantic. This works. Teach every commander. Janet felt nothing. No relief. No satisfaction. Just the knowledge that it had taken her brother's death to make an admiral stop calling the chalk trick stupid. Horton spent 2 hours questioning them. He wanted to understand everything. Then he asked the critical question. If we implement these tactics fleet-wide, what happens to U-boat destruction rates? Janet pulled out her calculations. She had been working on this for months. Sir, current tactics result in 5.2 U-boats destroyed per month. That's because escorts leave the convoy to chase U-boats, but the U-boats escape 82% of the time. The chase wastes time and resources. With tight defensive screens, escorts stay with the convoy. U-boats can't penetrate. They're forced to surface or retreat. When they do, they become vulnerable. Multiple escorts can coordinate attacks. Based on German tactical manuals and our simulations, tight screens should increase U-boat destruction rates to approximately 15 to 17 U-boats per month. That's 3 times the current rate. Horton asked, "You're saying we can triple our kill rate just by staying with the convoy?" "Yes, sir. Because U-boats will have to expose themselves for much longer. And our escorts will be in position to coordinate attacks instead of chasing alone." Horton looked at Captain Roberts. "Why wasn't I told about this 8 months ago?" Roberts said quietly, "We sent reports, sir. The Admiralty called it a stupid chalk trick." Horton's jaw tightened. Then he gave orders. Every escort commander in the western approaches would be trained at Watu immediately. They would learn the new doctrine. They would practice until they understood why aggressive pursuit killed convoys. And they would implement tight defensive screens starting immediately. The order went out on March 4, 1943. Within days, officers started arriving at Derby House. Dozens of them. Most arrived skeptical. Some arrived angry. All of them had heard about the stupid chalk trick. The first week was brutal. Officers who had commanded ships for decades were being taught tactics by teenagers. The resistance was fierce. Lieutenant Commander Davies arrived on March 9. He had been commanding escorts for 2 years. Lost 1 convoy. Saved 3 others. He considered himself experienced. He walked into the pit, looked at Janet, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "So this is the girl who thinks she knows more than the entire Royal Navy. This ought to be entertaining." Robert said calmly, "Commander Davies, would you like to command the convoy?" "Love to. Let's see if this chalk floor nonsense actually works." Janet sank his convoy in 38 minutes. 14 merchant ships destroyed. Davies had followed doctrine perfectly. Chased every U-boat she exposed. Left gaps every single time. When the simulation ended, Davies was red-faced. "That's not realistic. Real U-boats can't coordinate like that." Roberts pulled out a report. Convoy HX 229. March 1943. Just 2 weeks earlier. 41 ships sunk. The U-boats had used the exact tactics Janet just demonstrated. Davies read the report. His hands were shaking. 41 ships. Over 1,000 sailors. Dead because escorts did exactly what he had just done. "Run it again," he said quietly. Roberts ran it again. This time with tight defensive screens. Davies's convoy survived. 0 losses. Davies left Derby House 6 hours later. Before he left, he found Janet. "Miss Oakley, I owe you an apology. And I owe you my life. Because if I had gone back out there without learning this, I would have gotten my entire convoy killed. Thank you. Most arrived skeptical. Some arrived angry. All of them had heard about the stupid chalk trick. Commander Phillips arrived on March 8, 28 years in the Navy. He looked at the chalk floor and laughed. This is what all the fuss is about. A floor game. This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Robert said, Commander, would you like to command the convoy? Absolutely. Let's get this over with. Janet sank his convoy in 41 minutes. 15 merchant ships destroyed. Phillips wasn't laughing anymore. Roberts ran it again. Different tactics. Tight screen. Phillips's convoy survived. 0 ships lost. Phillips asked, does this really work in combat? Roberts showed him casualty reports. Real battles. The numbers matched Janet's simulations almost perfectly. Phillips left Derby House a changed man. He told other officers, that girl with chalk taught me more in 3 hours than I learned in 3 years at sea. Between March and July 1943, WADA trained 2,500 officers. Every single one learned the same lesson. The stupid chalk trick worked. And aggressive pursuit didn't. The results were immediate. And devastating for Germany. April 1943, British escorts using new tactics destroyed 15 U-boats. 3 times the February rate. But May 1943 was when everything changed. Using tight defensive screens, British and Allied escorts destroyed 41 German U-boats in 31 days. 41 U-boats. In 1 month. The German Naval Command was in shock. They had never seen destruction rates like this. U-boat commanders were sending desperate reports back to headquarters. We cannot penetrate the new defensive formations. The escorts stay together. They coordinate attacks. We are being destroyed. One captured U-boat commander, interrogated in June 1943, described the new tactics with a mixture of fear and respect. Before, we could predict what the escorts would do. They would chase. We would dive and escape. Easy. Now they don't chase. They stay together like a wall of steel. We cannot get through. And when we try, they all attack at once. It is impossible. German Admiral Karl Donitz wrote in his diary on May 12, 1943, the enemy has fundamentally changed their tactical approach. Our Wolfpack doctrine is obsolete. We are losing U-boats at unsustainable rates. On May 24, he made the decision that confirmed Germany had lost the Battle of the Atlantic. He withdrew the entire U-boat fleet from the North Atlantic. For context. In all of 1942, the Allies had destroyed 87 U-boats total. That's 7.25 per month. In January 1943, 6 U-boats destroyed. In February 1943, 19 U-boats destroyed. In March 1943, 15 U-boats destroyed. In April 1943, 15 U-boats destroyed. In May 1943, 41 U-boats destroyed. The destruction rate had increased by 5.6 times compared to early 1943. More than 3 times the rate from before Janet's tactics were implemented. Grand Admiral Karl Donitz, commander of the German U-boat fleet, wrote in his war diary, "We have lost the Battle of the Atlantic. The enemy has developed new tactical doctrines that make Wolfpack operations impossible. Our U-boats are being destroyed at rates we cannot sustain." He called it Black May. The worst month in U-boat history. On May 24, 1943, Donitz withdrew his entire U-boat fleet from the North Atlantic. The Wolfpacks were decimated. The convoy routes were secure. The war had turned. Not because of better technology. Not because of Enigma code-breaking. Because a teenage girl with chalk had proven that defensive tactics worked and aggressive pursuit didn't. Let's look at what happened after March 1943. Before Janet's tactics, January 1941 to February 1943. Average U-boats destroyed per month, 5.2 average Allied ships sunk per month, 96 kill ratio, for every one U-boat destroyed, 18.4 Allied ships sank. After Janet's tactics, March, December 1943. Average U-boats destroyed per month, 16.8 average Allied ships sunk per month, 26 kill ratio, for every one U-boat destroyed, 1.5 Allied ships sank. The U-boat destruction rate increased by 3.23 times. Allied ship losses decreased by 73%. But numbers alone don't tell the full story. Behind every statistic was a human life saved or lost. Captain William Morrison commanded Escort Group B-7. He trained at Watu in April 1943. Between April and December 1943, his group escorted 23 convoys across the Atlantic. Using Janet's tactics, he lost 0 merchant ships. 0. Before Watu, Morrison had lost 17 ships in 5 convoy runs. After Watu, 0 losses in 23 runs. Morrison wrote in his personal diary in December 1943, "That girl with chalk saved my life and the lives of every sailor under my command. I was following doctrine. Doing everything by the book. And I was getting good men killed. She showed me the truth in 3 days. I will never forget her." Commander James Patterson had a similar experience. Before Watu training, for convoys, 31 ships lost. After Watu training, 18 convoys, 2 ships lost total. The pattern repeated across the entire Atlantic fleet. Officers who trained at Watu stopped losing convoys. Officers who hadn't trained yet continued to suffer catastrophic losses. By September 1943, the difference was so obvious that the Admiralty made Watu training mandatory for all escort commanders. Not optional. Mandatory. Because the data was undeniable. Between March 1943 and May 1945, the tactics Janet developed with chalk on a basement floor resulted in 237 additional U-boats destroyed, compared to previous rates, for 000 Allied merchant ships saved 48,000 Allied sailors saved from drowning. All because one girl refused to believe that her stupid chalk trick was stupid. The innovations had code names. Raspberry. Beta search. Pineapple. Step aside. Raspberry was rapid illumination. When a U-boat appeared, all escorts would fire star shells in coordinated patterns. Full coverage in 90 seconds. No hiding places. U-boats were forced to surface or retreat into coordinated attacks. Beta search was mathematical prediction. U-boats shadowed convoys from predictable positions. Beta search plotted those positions. Escorts would move there preemptively. Force U-boats to submerge before they could attack. While submerged, U-boats were slow and vulnerable. Pineapple was coordinated evasion. When multiple U-boats attacked, escorts would execute overlapping zigzag patterns with continuous coverage. Created interlocking fields of fire. U-boats couldn't coordinate attacks and became isolated targets. Step aside was acoustic torpedo evasion. Precisely timed course changes that broke torpedo tracking. While U-boats were reloading, escorts would counterattack. All of these tactics had one thing in common. They kept escorts with the convoy. They forced U-boats to expose themselves for longer periods. They allowed coordinated attacks instead of solo chases. And they tripled the U-boat destruction rate while simultaneously cutting Allied losses by 73%. The stupid chalk trick had won the Battle of the Atlantic. Janet continued at Watu until May 1945. She trained over 5,000 Allied commanders personally. The U.S. Navy adopted her tactics in July 1943. The Canadian Navy by January 1944. Every Allied navy that ran Atlantic convoys learned from the girl with chalk. By mid-1944, German U-boat operations in the North Atlantic had essentially ceased. The Atlantic was won. When the war ended, WADA was classified. Everything was buried in top-secret files. The Wrens were bound by the Official Secrets Act. They couldn't talk about their service. Janet married in 1947. Had 3 children. Worked as a mathematics teacher. Never mentioned the war. For 30 years, nobody knew what she had accomplished. In 1974, the government partially declassified WADA operations. Books started appearing. Most focused on technology and machines. The Wrens were footnotes. In 1998, a comprehensive study concluded that WADA's tactics had saved approximately 4,000 merchant ships and 48,000 sailors. Janet was 73 when the book was published. She granted a few interviews. Was modest. Deflective. But officers who trained at WADA remembered. Admiral Sir John Fruin said, "Miss Oakley taught me more in 3 days than I learned in 3 years at sea. She destroyed my convoy 6 times with chalk and explained why I failed. Every admiral who called her tactics stupid should have been court-martialed for negligence. She saved my life before I ever left port." Janet Patricia Oakley died November 5, 2009. She was 86 years old. Her obituary in the Times was 1 paragraph. Former Wrens officer who served in naval operations during World War II. No mention of WADA. No mention of the 48,000 lives saved. No mention that she had tripled the U-boat destruction rate with a piece of chalk. Her funeral was small. Family. A few friends. 3 elderly men in naval uniforms stood at the back of the church. Nobody knew who they were. After the service, one of them approached Janet's daughter. He was 91 years old. Tears running down his face. "Your mother saved my life," he said. March 1943. "I was a lieutenant. Commanded escorts. I thought I knew everything. Your mother destroyed my convoy in a simulation. Made me watch. Made me understand. Then she taught me how to do it right. I escorted 31 convoys after that. Lost 2 ships total. Before her training, I had lost 19 ships in 4 convoys." He held out a faded photograph. Young officers standing in a basement. A girl with chalk. "This is the only picture I have of her. I've carried it for 66 years. I wanted you to know. Your mother was a hero. She saved thousands of us. And nobody knows her name." Janet's daughter took the photograph. She had never seen it before. Had never known the full story of what her mother did in that basement. But the tactics survived. U.S. Naval War College teaches escort doctrine based on WADA principles. The Royal Navy's tactical manual includes variants of Raspberry and Beta Search. None credit her directly. At the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, there is a small exhibit about WADA. One photograph shows the staff in 1943. 11 Wrens in the pit. Janet is third from the left. 19 years old. Chalk in her hand. Looking at the camera. Determined. Focused. Completely unaware that her stupid chalk trick would save 48,000 lives and triple the rate at which German U-boats were destroyed. In 2018, a group of naval historians petitioned the British government to posthumously award Janet the George Medal for civilian gallantry. The petition included testimonials from 47 officers who had trained at WADA and credited her with saving their lives. The government declined. They said the award couldn't be given posthumously for actions that took place during classified operations. So Janet's official recognition remains a 1-paragraph obituary. But in naval academies around the world, her tactics are still taught. Students learn about defensive escort screens, coordinated illumination, mathematical prediction of submarine positions. They just don't learn the name of the 19-year-old girl who invented them while admirals called her work stupid. That photograph is her legacy. Not recognition. Not fame. The courage to keep using the chalk trick even when admirals called it stupid. The courage to prove that mathematics could win wars when tradition was losing them. The courage to stand in a freezing basement 5 days after her brother's funeral and force the Royal Navy to change. She sank Admiral Horton's convoy in 47 minutes with chalk. Made him watch every mistake. Every gap. Every dead merchant ship. Made him understand that calling it stupid was killing British sailors. And within 3 months, U-boats were being destroyed at 3 times the previous rate. All because one girl refused to believe her chalk trick was stupid. And almost nobody knows her name.